All right, well, I'll get started then. So, yeah, welcome everybody. We may get a few people to join in a bit. I have some technical issues, maybe getting back in, but yeah, so we have a few birthdays going on here. I think Craig Rash's birthday is today, and Chris's is tomorrow, and Connie Sovda, our newsletter editor, hers was the 6th on Monday. I got one coming up pretty soon in a week or so. Or it's Capricorn's year. I'm trying to figure out how I ever lived this long. But anyway, I'm still here. So Francis says in our account that we have $8,806.19. And our bird feed fund, though, is down. We're still in the hole, $333.88. So we'll get that back up where it should be. I think we spent almost $2,000 last year on bird feed. So that cost has gone up a little bit, but
Yeah, we
things
were
are
actually
working out.
even, and they were actually even until the first when I had to put some more money in.
Okay. Well, we sure keep it going anyway. Um, maybe you saw in the newsletter too, now at the beginning of the year, now's the time if you have a local or a Prairie Rapids Audubon Society membership, now's the time to renew. Those go from January to December, and if you were one that renewed last fall, October, November, so that would work for the rest of the year. National Audubon memberships are they come due from the month that you signed up with National Audubon. You also saw, unfortunately, with Pat Dollar-Gardell passed away. There's quite a few people at her funeral, and there's a note in her on our website about that and on their newsletter. And we've set up a separate account for memorials. I think we're about $500-600 right now. And if you would like to donate something in her memory, we'll work with the family on something appropriate to remember Pat by. You may remember she had the really great bird store as a supporter of birding, and also as a member of our Audubon Society as a board member. And she was president of the Waterloo Bird Club before they merged with us. Most of the bird feeders that are out at George Wythe were donated by her. And so she has a long legacy of helping birds and helping our community. So it's appropriate, I think, to remember her financially and find something to remember her for through the future as well. Next month is a silent auction again. We have quite a few items, books and feeders and artwork, and I even have 3 steel garbage cans that I got from no longer being used that are great for bird seed. I'll bring those. They were at the Cedar Falls Visitor Center, and they no longer use those in the basement. Dave Eastman runs those feeders for us and keeps the seed over at his house. So look forward to that next month. Our grant applications will be going out pretty quick. And so through our 6 counties, if you know of a project or something that county conservation or the nature centers or so can be thinking about, go ahead and encourage that. Now's a good time to start getting a hold of your legislators. We learned at the Nature Summit that they prefer single letters, and even better yet, face-to-face visits than petitions and things like that. I just finished listening to the governor's State of the state address, just finished a few minutes ago. And there was absolutely nothing mentioned about environment, farming practices, water quality, absolutely nothing. So that should be it is a major concern for a lot of us and throughout the state. And it should be for our legislators as well. So feel free to send a postcard to them or call them up. Both sides, Republican and Democrat, and let your feelings be known. See, Barb, you went to the REAP Congress, is right, Barb Sanders?
Oh, that's coming up.
Oh, it is. I thought it happened already.
And I'm really not sure I'm gonna go because I looked at the weather and I don't know.
Was it this weekend?
It's this weekend and it's gonna be snow again.
Oh, I thought it was last week. Okay.
I did want to mention that one of the forums is gonna be on the environment over at Hawkeye.
Saw that today. I think, Candace, did you put that out also on the?
I think it's the last one. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. I got an email on that, and we'll probably post something on our website and emails too for people. Well, let us know, Barb, how that goes. I know when we went to the REAP Congress, they're every year for 27 years they've been asking to fully fund REAP, and it hasn't happened yet. We suggested that not to fully fund REAP, but to increase it from supposed to be like 22 million to 25, and they come up with 12 or 14 every year. Put it back to where it should be in today's dollars at 35. Let's fully fund. Let's increase it to 35 million. The state has the money. They're offering more tax cuts and other things. So I think it's a money to be spent in a wise way. We'll be starting our bluebird surveys here January 15th to February 15th, and looking at our Christmas bird counts. We've had bluebirds on several of them. I had some just outside of town here last week, actually. So hopefully this year we'll see some more, but that may be a sign of climate change as more bluebirds start moving up in our area for winter. So we've had some reports of saw-whet owls over at Greenbelt Lake in that area, maybe some other places. People have been seeing some northern shrikes around. We've had open water for quite a while. In fact, I think it was Christmas Day. There's boats all over the place out on the lakes and rivers. Couldn't believe it. Often does that happen. And the water's so low, you want to do a canoe float. The rivers are too low to even do that. But so with open water, there was some ducks around, goldeneye, and had a couple of black ducks over at Prairie Lakes in that area. But now with the cold weather coming up, I think we're going to be looking at ice. But with the snow now, I think we got a good foot. I'm sure thankful my neighbor let me borrow his snow blower because I'd still be out there. Good time to start looking for longspurs. And one bird that we didn't see on our Christmas bird counts were horned larks. When usually we get them a lot, they're usually pretty common. But now with the snow, we should be able to start to see them along the side of the roads. So what are you seeing? Are you seeing anything interesting or unusual or something you want to say? I'll say one thing, the cardinals sure look great in the snow right now.
We had
Anything to share from anybody?
Yeah. This is Chris. We had about a dozen pine siskins the other day with the first snow.
Right.
Yeah. And today we had a mink run across our yard.
A what?
A mink.
Oh, mink. Okay.
We've got that wood pile right by the bird feeders, and it ran over and ran in.
Sure. Yeah. Great. Yeah, pine siskins. I think there's been some over at Hartman Reserve. Heard them in that area, so we should be seeing some of those this winter too.
And our pileated woodpecker has been
Yep.
ravaged with
Woodpeckers.
soot.
Anything else from anybody? Okay. Trying to read what I wrote here, see. Oh, yeah. So next month, we have Connie Mutel in our February meeting. We'll be back in person again. And it's a good thing we're not in person today because we would not be having it. Everything's pretty much closed up. Plows finally came through my street just a couple hours ago. So Connie Mutel is a award-winning author and conservationist. And many of us may have read her most recent book, Tending Iowa's Land. It's got high reviews from conservationists around here. It's a series of 20-some essays on good things that people are doing across Iowa for water and farming and that. So we'll look forward to having her as a speaker next month. But this month, we are really blessed to have somebody on owls, and we're going to I'll turn that over to Candace, who will give us the introduction, and we'll welcome Carla here in just a bit. Candace?
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce Carla Blom to you. I've known Carla for decades now, and she is a mover and a shaker and has been doing owl education since 1998. She is the founder and executive director of the International Owl Center in Houston, Minnesota. And hopefully maybe at the end of her presentation, after some Q&A, she might give us a sneak peek or talk about the new center that they are doing fundraising for. She has been doing research in owl vocalizations, and her research on great horned owl vocalizations is well known in ornithology, and now she's going to talk to us about barn owl vocalizations. She has presented internationally and also on television, and you can read more about her bio on our website. I'm very pleased to welcome to the floor Carla Blom.
Thank you. It's nice to see you again, because yes, we've known each other for a very long time from the bike trail, from the Houston Nature Center. So for those of you who aren't that familiar with the International Owl Center, we're located in Houston, Minnesota, which is in the southeasternmost county in Minnesota, so kind of the toe of Minnesota. And Houston is a town of less than 1,000 people. So people always say, why on earth do you have an International Owl Center in Houston, Minnesota? And the answer is it just evolved there. We never intended to do an International Owl Center. We started with the Houston Nature Center as a trailhead for the River Bike Trail. We needed to have something as a trailhead, and we had this beautiful park that we started from scratch, and the people in town said, hey, let's make our trailhead a nature center. So I got involved in the planning of that back in 1996, and that we started in literally the brat stand from Houston Hoedown days was our first facility that we were in temporarily in 2000. In 2001, the center was built. But I started doing programs with Alice the Great Horned Owl in 1998 as kind of a lead in to the Nature Center. And then once it was built, she was the star of the show as the only live animal. So I thought, well, how do we bring tourism and environmental education together? Because the only reason we had a nature center in a town so small was for tourism purposes. And I thought, well, everybody likes Alice. She hatched somewhere in February or March. Let's do a hatch day party for her. We'll call it an owl festival. We'll bring in some live animals and do some fun family stuff. And the first year, 300 people showed up. And we thought, whoa, that was pretty good for a town our size. So we kept doing it. And within a few years, we had people flying here from Alabama, California, New York. And we thought, why on earth are people flying to Houston, Minnesota, the first weekend in March for our Owl Festival? And that's when we figured out there was nobody else in North America doing anything like it. So we thought, well, cool, let's build on this. We added all kinds of things. We added a World Owl Hall of Fame where we solicited nominations for people who had just, like dedicated their lives to owls. But we had judges from around the world who were experts do the judging, not us. But we got to present the awards. So then the all these top owl experts from all over the world come to Houston to receive their awards and speak. So then we really kind of got this international reputation. We started well, from the beginning, we had a kids owl art contest that was kind of a local coloring contest, but then morphed into this highly competitive international competition. Now we get 2,000 to 3,000 entries from 30 to 50 countries every year. I mean, it's amazing what these kids do. So as the festival grew and we started getting more than 1,000 people coming, which was more than the population of our town, we thought, well, Minnesota's got, you know, the Wolf Center, the Bear Center, the Eagle Center. There's a Loon Center starting. Wisconsin's got the Crane Center. And we thought, well, there's no all owl education center. So let's do that. So we opened in 2015 in an old storefront. So it's not where you would expect us to be. It's a brick building in the middle of town. So the owls don't live on site. They commute back and forth to work. And as Candace alluded to, we're working on building what we should have and what we actually need. So I can talk about that at the end of the program. Let me share my screen, because today I'm going to be talking about barn owls. So usually I'm doing presentations about my great horned owl vocal research. There we go. And that led to this barn owl research. So the great horned owl research started because Alice is a human imprint. She was injured when she was very, very young. She thought of me as her mate, so she expected me to respond as a mate, and I wasn't vocalizing properly or behaving properly, and she was getting mad at me. And so kind of in self-defense, I went to the scientific literature to try and figure out what I was supposed to do. Found out nobody had ever studied their vocalizations, so did what I could with her in captivity and wild owls in the area, and then realized to really get everything and the behavioral context, I needed a captive breeding pair, because you can have the best webcam on earth and all you get is what goes on at the nest for a very short period of time. It's not throughout the year. So I got a captive non-releasable breeding pair from the Raptor Education Group in 2010, Rusty and Iris. And then we outfitted their aviaries with security cameras and microphones, live streamed it online so everybody who was watching could help with observations. And so that's kind of what we were doing, but this happened. So I'm going to go backtrack a little bit with barn owls, but you'll see where this dovetails in a second. So barn owls in Minnesota, they're just sort of an anomaly, like they're not really supposed to be here. So I talked to the Minnesota Ornithologists Union and got their records for how many were reported by decade. And you can see there were some big bumps. They're not huge. This is like 12 in an entire decade. That's not very many. But you can see all of a sudden things are starting to go up here. This is only 3 years worth. Well, actually, it's mostly 2 years worth. 3 years worth would be probably up to 14 now or something. So in Minnesota, the DNR status is they're extraliminal. Like they're not supposed to be here. So we don't even have a classification. I believe they're listed as endangered in Iowa. They do better farther south, but kind of the northern part of their range in the mid-60s, they just sort of disappeared from. The Minnesota Ornithologist Union status as of 2014 was accidental, but that has now changed to casual. So as we're getting more and more sightings. So this is the vocal research I was talking about. So we have Iris sitting in her nest here, Rusty here. We still live stream Iris. Rusty passed away a couple of years ago when he went completely blind. So she's single, but she's still online and you can still watch her on our YouTube channel and hear our other owls. But those microphones in the aviaries, the key thing was they were very, very sensitive and they pick up everything that's going on in the wild within about half a mile. And in 2014, we detected a wild barn owl. Now, it took me 2 years to convince the MOU that that was indeed actually a barn owl and that I could indeed tell a barn owl from a juvenile great horned owl begging call, because like I had been studying them for years. I could tell the difference. But that was kind of where things started to happen. And then in 2016, we got a captive barn owl for the Owl Center. Her name's Piper. And she would occasionally wind up talking with wild barn owls. And we have security cameras on all of our captive birds so we can look at their vocalizations and behaviors and see what's going on when we're not there because they're most active at night. So this is Piper in her aviary. You'll hear her scream, and then you'll hear a wild one flying by screaming quite loud. So this happened several times. So in 2017, it happened multiple times in 2018, a whole bunch in 2019. And by then I'm going, wait, the wild barn owls are probably not saying, oh, there's owl center facilities, let's go there. They're probably in other places, but our equipment was fixed, so we couldn't really move it around. So in 2020, I got a grant from the Minnesota Ornithologists Union to get 2 Songmeter minis. So think basically a trail cam, except it records audio instead of video. And then you can program it with your phone to do different recording schedules and whatnot. And then we used cable locks to attach them to trees, but so we could move them around and put them in different areas. And got a 1-year subscription to the Kaleidoscope Pro software for processing it, because otherwise you have to scroll through all of the recordings. This lets you pick certain parameters and sift through it, and it pulls out the things that match your parameters. You still have to do a lot of digging, but it helps a lot. So Piper was very helpful in the research because she helped me test all the settings because nobody had done this before for barn owls. So we could use her to help test the recorder settings. We basically decided to set the recording length at 30 to 60 minutes after sunset, because these guys are really nocturnal. They're not crepuscular like a lot of our owls where they start calling in the evening. These guys, it's totally dark before they're calling. They're not calling at dawn and dusk. So this is different than our other owls. And then sampling rate is based on the frequency of their vocalizations. It needs to be twice as high as their highest vocalization that you're sampling. We used 30-minute recording settings, maximized the gain, which was 24 dB. And when we maximized the gain, we knew where Piper was. So I gradually moved the recorder farther and farther away and realized you could just barely at that maximum gain detect her a kilometer away. And so there's some trees and some buildings in the it's not wide open between that. So that affects things a little bit, but somewhere around a kilometer away, we could detect. So a little over half a mile. We tested the software settings with her recordings also. So this kind of gave the band of frequency width, because I could say, okay, I want to search from 1500 to 3300 hertz. And I don't need anything else. The length of the calls, there's an intersyllable gap setting that you can use. And this is some fancy schmancy stuff that, some settings anyway, but these are the settings that I used. Now, when you process things through Kaleidoscope, and you say, okay, I want all these things of this setting, it'll say, okay, process 3 months of recording and you have 8,000 detections. Okay, I don't have 8,000 barn owl calls, but it clusters them into different groups. And then because barn owls don't call very much, they don't cluster very well, I still kind of have to go through all of them. So you're visually looking at the spectrograms and just kind of scrolling through them. And many things don't look anything like a barn owl, but there's a whole bunch of things that look really similar to a barn owl that you have to stop and listen to see if it's a barn owl. So this first one is a raccoon. They don't sound the same, but they look the same. Next one is a gray tree frog. And next one is a barn owl. And the last one is a juvenile great horned owl. So those are some of the things that can look really similar to barn owl calls. Gray squirrels can do a bark that looks really similar also when they do that. Rah, 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 that can look really similar also. So I have to kind of dig through all of that. Because I only had 2 recorders that first year, what I did was I would kind of pair them about a kilometer apart and put them in one location for 2 weeks, move them to another spot for 2 weeks, move them to another spot for 2 weeks. So I could kind of cover a lot of ground. So I did that in several different counties here in Southeast Minnesota. And we got barn owls at 2 new locations besides here, because we kept getting them here, but found 2 new ones. So that was really exciting. But what kind of effort did it take to get that? A lot. So that's 393 recorder nights. So a recorder night is 1 recorder out for 1 night. So I had 2 recorders out of there most of the time. Drove 1,008 miles and put in 150 hours. And I need to adjust this so I can see what I'm doing here. Detected barn owl screams. Whoops, hang on. Back up here. I need to move my little Zoom window here. 9 nights at 3 locations. And this was one of the locations we already had. So that's not a lot. But it's like winning the lottery, though, because I found barn owls at new locations in Minnesota. What we did then was where we found barn owls and where there was really good habitat, we installed nest boxes, 5 nest boxes, and we monitored 3 of those with trail cams in 2021. We also got another grant from the MOU because things were looking positive to continue the research. We got 2 song meter minis from the Minnesota Ornithologists Union. We got 1 song meter mini from the DNR. The company gave us a song meter micro. And very importantly, I was able to get these lithium lids that take a special lithium ion battery. And those can run no matter what the temperature is. So that allowed me to do it through winter. Otherwise, I couldn't do that. So that was really key. The other thing awesome about the lithium ion batteries is they run a lot longer. I was going through so many AA alkaline batteries. It was just so wasteful. This way, these are rechargeable and I can deploy them for like 3 months at a time. It also makes it easier to put them farther away because I only have to check them like once every 3 months. So what I did in 2021 is I put them in fixed locations for the entire year because these birds really weren't calling much. So I thought I'm just going to put them in one spot, leave them there for the whole entire year. And I got barn owls there, and at a nest over there. There was only 1 spot that I did not get a barn owl. And the trail cams, even though 2 of them were at locations where I had barn owls recorded, they didn't pick up any at the nests. So that was not something that was helpful for detecting barn owls. So if you look at the detections, this is a little bit complicated. It shows you how long each recorder was deployed. So it kind of depended on when I got it because they were back ordered. You know, this was COVID stuff, so manufacturing, whatever. So as soon as I got them, then I deployed them. So it wasn't from the beginning of the year. So the main thing is how many nights they were deployed, the number of calls, and the number of detection nights. So it's not much. I mean, 1.9%. Woo! And this was by my place where we knew we had them, and Piper was talking back to him. 5% of nights we got them, and some were nothing. And then this was where we moved it to the barn owl nest that was found in the city of La Crosse. And even then it was 58% of nights. It wasn't every night. They don't talk that much. It's really crazy. So this barn owl nest in La Crosse, this was sort of a crazy thing. I was sitting there eating breakfast one morning and kind of scrolling through my Facebook feed. And one of our board members sent me a Facebook message saying, oh, you probably already saw this post by the Coulee Region Humane Society, you know, and I looked at it and they had a baby barn owl. And I just about fell off my chair. I'm like, whoa, they have a baby barn owl. And I read the post and they talked about it. I'm like, my gosh, what time do they open? I'm like dying until they open to call them, like, oh my gosh. And then I went back and forth. Do I share this on our page? Do I not share this on our page? You know, because sharing owl nest stuff. Well, they didn't know where the nest was. So what had happened was this young owl had fallen out of a nest in the city of La Crosse in somebody's backyard. They saw the baby on the ground. They didn't know it was a barn owl or that it was rare. They called the Humane Society. They came and picked it up. Kathy, who's in charge of their rehab department, was on vacation. Her staff texted her and said, "Hey, we got a baby barn owl." And she's like, "Yeah, right. It's a barn owl. It's not a barn owl. We don't have them." She didn't even bother to double check because she knew they were wrong. She came home and went, "Oh my gosh, it's actually a barn owl." So she contacted Wisconsin DNR and they're like, "There's no way that it hatched in Wisconsin, in the state of Wisconsin. We haven't had one for over 20 years. It had to have come in from Iowa because they're starting to get them." And Kathy was kind of like, "Seems like it was a little young to be flying, but whatever." So she kept it with her because they didn't know where the nest was. So I did decide to share it because nobody knew if there was a nest or whatever. Shared it on Facebook. Almost immediately, this woman comments on the post saying, "Oh yeah, I found that in my backyard." I hid the comment immediately and said, "Please call me." And she called me right away. And I said, "Don't let everybody know, or you will never have privacy until those owls are gone. You will be inundated because this is a huge deal." She's like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Well, you want to come over?" So I'm driving the Owlmobile. I'm like, I cannot park the Owlmobile in front of her house. There could not be anything more conspicuous. So I met my husband over there and we drove his vehicle. And we walked into the yard and I'm like, "It's that tree." And she said, "But there's kind of a nest." I said, "It's that tree, guaranteed." "Are you sure there's?" "No, it's that tree." It was this huge half-dead silver maple tree right on the property line between her and her neighbor. And, you know, a bunch of branches have fallen off, but it has huge cavities in it. And we brought an extendable pole and an endoscope. So we didn't have to climb the tree, but we could just use that and poke around and look into the holes without climbing. So the third hole we poked into, my husband's turning it and I'm looking at it, I'm going, "Oh my gosh, there's barn owl legs." Turn the camera, and these are the owls that were in the nest. So immediately I called Kathy. I'm like, "Hey, we found the nest. We got to get that one back in here, and we got a bander and da da da." Anyway, and put a recorder there. So that was really helpful and super exciting. It was the first barn owl nest documented in the state of Wisconsin in 22 years. So I put a recorder there, of course, and that allowed me to get some of their other vocalizations that you would get in a family group that I don't get with a single bird or with the wild ones passing by. So their territorial call. We only got a few of those, zillions of begging calls. Oops. And I thought, oh, the parents will make a call when they come in with food. Nope, they don't. All you hear is the kids start squabbling. This is what it sounds like when there's a food delivery. The parents are silent. And then when the young were right around fledging age, the neighbors had dogs and cats. They were inside, but if they took them out, like the dogs to do their business, that the barn owls did not like that. And they screamed bloody murder over and over and over and over again until their dogs were back in the house. And I was able to get recordings of some of their other vocalizations that I do hear from Piper, our human imprint, who thinks I'm her mate. So they do these cliquey, squeaky kinds of things. And then this one is kind of what I call her happy squeaks. Piper does this to me quite a bit. So it's good to record that from wild owls also. So in 2021 compared to 2020, I had 1,018 recorder nights because I had more recorders compared to 393. That's a barn owl nest box pole with some metal flashing on it. So I just put the recorder up above, which inconveniently I could just barely reach. Drove fewer miles and fewer hours. This is just being more efficient. Even though I had more recorders, I could deploy them for longer amounts of time. So it was much more efficient. So I got 41 individual barn owl screams. So that's not much. On 13 different nights compared to 9 nights at 6 locations versus 3. So now I had more new locations. The new methodology was certainly working better than what I did before. So in 2022, I decided, well, I know they're in those locations, let's look other places. So there had been some documentation of them along the Mississippi River. So I put some there. One of our staff, her parents lived in Freeborn County and had some suitable habitat. So we put one there. And then, of course, we put one at the nest in La Crosse. The nest, it was interesting. So we were watching, we'd stop in every now and then with the pole cam so that we could check and see if they were there. And the neighbors are like, I think they've left because there's no poop. There's no pellets anymore. We don't hear anything. We think they've left. And I said, nope, she's on eggs. They are just so inconspicuous. They didn't even know they were there. Well, there were 2 young ones. Well, apparently 3. One had died in the nest and the other 2 just kept jumping out of the nest. So we wound up having a cam in there and tried a whole bunch of things. They wound up having to go to rehab because they just kept jumping out. And then a storm snapped off the tree right at the nest. Actually, on a day we were in La Crosse going to check the nest. So unfortunately, that was the end of that nest. The one owlet was in the tree and the neighbor found it injured the next day, and that one went to rehab also. The neighbors were really invested in their barn owls, so they got a nest box up almost immediately, but the owls didn't come and use it. Another thing we encountered that year was fast growing trees. When you put a cable lock around a tree and it grows really fast and you have it deployed for 6 months, you can have problems getting the cable locks off the trees, which they allude to in the manuals for the song meters, but like who reads all the fine print, right? Oops. We did have a lithium lid seal failure. The company was very good about replacing everything. Windscreens we had to replace because the sun fades them out, they get brittle, and things like to eat them. I don't know what ate a lot of them, but we had to replace them at least once a year. So here's where we put the recorders in, excuse me, 2022. And we got barn owls at every single location in 2022. So it's almost like, wow, this is crazy. You know, they don't talk much, but we're getting them like everywhere. So detection rates are higher where we knew they existed. So this was a known roost site, number 2. Number 1 was the nest site. And these were over by my place where we knew they existed. So those are where you're getting the higher rates. But otherwise, I mean, look at these percentage of detections. It's really, really, really low. But even with the known sites, overall detection rates were only like 3% of nights was there a barn owl call. This year, because I was getting ready for the World Owl Conference and leading the organization on that, I knew I wasn't going to have that much time. So one of my staff put recorders in Austin and then up by Cambridge, Minnesota. And then, of course, we had the ones here. And we got barn owls here, as we always do. And then we did up there also, which is a county that had, I don't think they've ever documented a barn owl in that county before. The Hormel Nature Center in Austin, we didn't get one. I'm not 100% sure that there wasn't one there, but they have Cope's gray tree frogs there. First place I have ever heard Cope's gray tree frogs, and their trills are faster than regular gray tree frogs. And they're almost indistinguishable spectrographically from a barn owl call. And I would get 30,000, not kidding, that is not an exaggeration, like actually 30,000 detections. And that was a bit more than I wanted to wade through individually. So we didn't get a detection of a barn owl there. So this is just showing the 3 locations where we did get them. It wasn't a whole lot this year that we got, but we still got them. This is what's interesting. When are barn owls calling? They're calling in the spring, like mid-March to the very beginning of June. And then they're calling mid-September, just barely into November. And then a little tiny blip the beginning of August. And that's it. They don't talk much, but if they're going to talk, it's mostly spring and fall. Having recorders out in the summer is almost pointless, and winter, almost the same thing, almost nothing. So tips for detecting barn owls. I mean, this is not a joke. That is barn owl poop on a vehicle. There was a building that had been damaged and they had a bunch of stuff stored in there, and there was just a caretaker that would come and check on it every now and then. And a barn owl moved in. I've never seen so many pellets and poop in one location. So that is literally all barn owl poop. Pretty amazing. So this is like for finding them using the software. They have classifiers and you can build to detect certain species. Totally doesn't work for barn owls. You have to review all the detections because they don't call much. Something like a great horned or a barred owl, they cluster wonderfully. It's easy to find, but for something that doesn't call much, you have to look at everything. And when the frogs are calling, nightmare, because they talk so much and they overlap in frequencies. And for spring peepers, I could say, okay, they overlap, so I'm only looking for the lower frequencies of the barn owl calls, and that would help. But the gray tree frogs, hopeless. And bait files, where I plant some barn owl calls in there, that sometimes can help attract the other ones in the clustering. So this is a map of all the counties where barn owls are officially documented in the state of Minnesota prior to 2011. And now here's what it looks like after 2011. So actually quite a lot of the same range. So we've had some nesting ones. Here's a little dot just across the river in La Crosse for the nesting ones there. Dead ones, they're just so good at evading detections. They're mostly found if they're nesting or dead. Those are the main ways that people find them. But audio is working really good. So we've got there, and there are all audio detections. These also, now we've had dead ones from Houston County, Olmsted County, and they found, there was one in Sax-Zim Bog. If you're familiar with Sax-Zim Bog, northwest of Duluth, a couple years ago, there was one in there in January. Nuts. There was one in Polk County, March of last year, found dead. So these things just kind of go everywhere. It's like, what are you doing up there? You're not built for cold weather, but they're just like showing up wildly all over the place. So basically the outcomes, barn owls went from accidental to casual almost completely due to my reports from the acoustic monitoring. So I think my acoustic monitoring is at least half of all the barn owls ever detected in the state of Minnesota. So that seems to be the best way to detect barn owls, because otherwise they're just really good at not being detected. And the DNR has said that when they review rare species listings, they'll probably look at reclassifying that, and certainly give it, you have to be a regular status bird, you have to see it in 10 out of 10 years. So we just need a few more years before they're officially regular in the state of Minnesota. Rare regular, but regular. And the DNR will consider they're looking at their status again when they review things. So lots of thank yous to the Minnesota Ornithologists Union, DNR, Summerall Valley Audubon, Wildlife Acoustics, and some private funders to help with this. My husband for assistance, and Andy, one of our staff at the Owl Center, Piper the barn owl, was very helpful also, and a whole lot of private landowners. I usually put my recorders purposefully on private land rather than public land. One, because it's easier, you don't have to get permission and do research report. I mean, I could do it, but it's just so much easier to do it on private property. And then I can report back to the people that own the property and say, here's all the species I detected on your property. You know, it's not a full list, but sometimes you find really wild, crazy stuff on there. So people enjoy hearing what wildlife is making noises on their property at night. So that's why I usually work with the private folks. Shall we stop and ask for questions about this before I talk about the Owl Center plans?
Sure. I've got a question to begin with. So what are your thoughts? Why don't barn owls vocalize as much? Is there any theory?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, most owls are quite vocal, and these guys are not. They're just not very vocal. And at the World Owl Conference in October, we had some folks who work with barn owls and band them. And when I said they're just not vocal, they were just nodding their head going, that's correct. They just don't say much.
Interesting. Yeah. but when they do, my gosh, that shriek is really
Make you jump out of your
something to
skin.
behold. Yeah, yeah. So interesting, Carla. What are
This-
the
this is-
questions?
Yeah, I have several questions as usual.
Go for
Um, this is so much fun. I'm sure glad you're doing this for us. Thank you. So I'm curious about the range and how much they move and if you use Modus at all.
There's not much data on the movement of barn owls. There's very little tracking that's been done on them, and I don't think anybody has used well, they might be doing that now out east. They may have mentioned that at the World Owl Conference, but there has been very little tracking done, because partly because they're not that big of a bird, and transmitters, you know, we've had to wait for technology to catch up so that it's small enough that it can be on the birds. The other thing is barn owls have very high mortality, especially that first year. I mean, most barn owls don't live more than 2 years, and very high mortality of young ones. They're so different than other owls. They're like the rabbits of the owl world. So they're into production, not maintenance. They can have, even here, they can have 2 broods per year and 5 to 7 kids at a time. So they're just kicking them out because they're super high mortality. So if you're investing in putting tracking equipment on a bird with super high mortality, you don't wind up getting much data. So not many people have done that. So we don't really know much about their movements and how far they go. There was some tracking done, I think in Kentucky, of like 2 birds. And, you know, it was a month or 2 on one and just a few more months on another one before they both died. So I think they move wildly all over the place. I think that's part of their biology and reproductive and survival strategy is you just disperse like crazy when they're young, and you get them showing up. They've bred in Canada before. But you know, as far as hard data, there's not a lot there yet.
That leads me into the next question is about what their food source. And here in Iowa, our Bruce Erzman, who was our former, Bruce,
He's
avian
a barn owl
biologist.
guy.
Huh?
He was the barn owl guy.
Yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, he's talking about food sources, that the volume of prey that they need to successfully nest. So I was curious about, I would associate barn owls more with big grasslands, and then here you are in La Crosse. What were they eating there? What was the primary food source, and maybe some of the other places you found them?
Voles. Voles.
Voles.
So those pellets that I dissected from La Crosse were probably 95% voles and 5% rats. So it was right next to the Mississippi River. So they were probably hunting on the bottoms, but one of the neighbors, it was interesting where they nested, although it was in the city. There were 2, it was in a tree. So 1 yard here, 1 yard here, the tree is smack dab in the middle. The people on the one side had almost no mowed grass. It was all landscaped with all kinds of stuff. And they said, we have voles everywhere. They couldn't walk anywhere in their yard without voles running out in front of them.
Yeah,
And then the
okay.
yard on the other side, they left the grass much longer than normal, very on purpose for wildlife. And so I don't think it's an accident that they nested right there. I think it was because of how those 2 property owners managed their property that provided that food for them.
And then the nest boxes, as far as I know, like in Iowa, they have them in like Rockford Fossil Quarry for one. They have places, but not much success with those, and maybe other birds using them instead of barn owls. And what's your experience with nest boxes and trying to get them to nest?
So it's not huge. The Zumbro Valley Audubon Society put up some nest boxes also, in addition to the 5 that we had. They put up at least another 5 or 10. Kestrels love to use them. We've had starlings in them. Kestrels are kind of the main thing. It's like, this huge condo for a kestrel to use. And then in the winter, The one we have here, we had screech owls roosting in it all winter long. So we had tons of bird feathers. They were eating birds. But barn owls just really didn't seem to have an interest. Now, that being said, they used the ones, most of ours here were the Simmons box design, where it's a really small oval hole, like 4¼ inches by 3.75. And when we got the first box, I'm like, well, I'm just going to put it in with Piper just to see what she does. Oh, magnet straight to that hole. It's like, whoa, we got to check this out. And she tried so hard and she could not physically get in the hole. So kind of one key takeaway was our birds here probably have to be bigger than the ones in California and Texas where it's warmer. And that's something that you normally find if you have a widespread species. The northern ones where it's colder are larger because you want to have that smaller surface area to volume ratio, so you're not losing as much heat. And when you're in a hot place, you want to be smaller so you lose heat better. So you need to have a bigger hole than that. So I think the Iowa DNR box design has at least a 6-inch hole. I think the Minnesota box design is like 6 inches by 7 inches rectangular. Those are great. The reason they're trying to make them as small as possible is to prevent great horned owls from getting in there, because great horned owls are one of the biggest predators of barn owls.
Yeah. Okay.
So key takeaway, you got to have a bigger hole and a fairly big box. But beyond that, I haven't had one in a box. Oh, this was another cool thing that we found out. When they were in that nest the second year in La Crosse in the spring before the nest tree snapped off, and they kept jumping out, we put a camera in there because it's right in people's backyards, and then we shared the cam with the neighbors. And they were shaking their heads. There were black flies swarming them. I mean, you probably know a lot of birds of prey have to deal with black flies biting. And we're like, well, if we're going to put them back, we don't want to have them harassed. We don't want them jumping out. And so Wisconsin DNR talked to Indiana DNR, and they have barn owl boxes that are being used that have black flies. And what they do, this was really cool. The yellow tree car fresheners, the Vanilla Roma air fresheners for your car, yellow trees. If you put a few of those in a box, it totally keeps away all the black flies. So we tried that, climbed up when I was putting one of the young ones back in, before I did it, I put 3 air fresheners in this giant nest cavity in the tree, and we had the camera there, and there were no more black flies after we put those air fresheners in there. That was cool.
That is cool. And the young did not peck at the air fresheners?
Nope.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really simple, low-tech kind of solution.
Yes. Like everybody should know this because it probably works for bluebirds and other things too.
Yeah.
Actually, I think some people do take a small part, like they'll cut them up and put small pieces in bluebird boxes also, where they have problems. Like we have problems with black flies in bluebird boxes here.
What was the name of that? Is that yellow tree? What do you call it?
Vanilla Roma.
Vanilla Roma. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the yellow. You can get them in gas stations. You know, it's those little tree-shaped car air fresheners.
So what's the next step in this acoustic research for barn owls? Do you have more plans to expand it, or?
Yeah, because it's kind of like, okay, well, they're here in southeast Minnesota, obviously, but we're getting more reports from northwestern Minnesota. I'm hoping to work with somebody in northwestern Minnesota to have them maintain the boxes and switch out the batteries and change the SD cards, and then they can just mail me the SD cards and I can process them. So that's what I'm hoping to do for this year. And then I have one along the Mississippi along here, because I kind of think the La Crosse area is kind of like a highway for them. I think that's what I'm thinking, is that they're kind of regular there.
Cool. Anybody else have a question for Carla about barn owls? All right, you can drop it in the chat and I can relay it, or just pipe in. Carla, tell us about the Owl Festival, which is tremendous fun, and the new center.
Okay.
What would you like us
So
to know?
the International Festival of Owls is March 1st to the 3rd, And we do like everything owl you could ever imagine and then some. So the Illinois Raptor Center brings live owls, including a live snowy owl. So that's quite popular. And they do programs. We do some programming. There's nest box building, pellet dissection, owl prowl buses that we go out in. There's a daytime birding bus trip, well, birding geology and natural history bus trip. And then we present the World Owl Hall of Fame Awards. So this year we have Ruar Solheim from Norway coming to speak. He's been there many times. He's a fantastic speaker. And Martin Čálek from the Czech Republic, who studies little owls. So he'll be our keynote speaker on that Saturday evening. And then for the keynote presentation, you have to sign up in advance for that. So you get to hear him speak. And then our local garden club is kind of become experts in doing owl themed food and refreshments. So we'll have that there. And Robin Warburton from Janesville, Minnesota does amazing hand carved and painted owl carvings. So she'll have an exhibit of those there also. And then there's lots of other stuff, owl vendors and yeah. So the festival actually has its own website separate from the Owl Center website because there's so much stuff. So that's festivalofowls.com. So the bus trips require pre-registration and the keynote speaker requires pre-registration. The other stuff you can pay at the door or you can pay admission online and then just bring your piece of paper to show that you're already paid. I should also mention we are doing a few speakers for our virtual Owl Expert Speaker Series this winter that we started during COVID. When we had to be completely shut down during COVID, well, we know all these owl people all over the world and we're all stuck at home in the whole planet and we all got forced to learn how to do Zoom. So I was like, hey, we've got a Zoom license, so let's do some presentations, and they would do them for free. And then we made it free to everybody. People could just donate to help cover our costs for the Zoom license and staff time to do it. And oh my gosh, it was extreme. The first year we had people from we did it every Sunday afternoon at 1. And every week at every presentation, we had people from 12 to 20 different countries. And I think the most we had attending live was like 600 people. And it's just amazing. So you'd have a 1-hour presentation and then an hour of questions, and we didn't even get through all the questions. So many of those are still posted on our website on YouTube. You can find the links to the YouTube ones. So if you go to internationalowlcenter.org and then programs, look for the Virtual Owl Expert Speaker Series. So this coming Sunday, we have a very relevant one coming up. Rocky Gutierrez is a retired spotted owl researcher. And he's going to be talking about the spotted owl barred owl conflict and the proposed management, which has been highly sensationalized in the media about shooting 500,000 barred owls and has gotten everybody in a tizzy. So he'll be talking about the details of what that means and then the broader concept of conservation conflict and what's the real issue here. And you'll be able to ask questions. That's kind of the key thing. Because there's a whole lot of questions because there hasn't been a whole lot of good information put out about that. But I mean, it's basically a horrible situation, but he knows it intimately. He's had lots of death threats in his life as a spotted owl biologist, as most of them have. And he figured he was fairly balanced because he got an equal number of death threats from the environmentalists as from the logging companies. This is like really serious business stuff.
Yeah.
So he's going to be speaking this coming Sunday. And then January 28th, we don't have it posted yet, so you're getting the inside on this. We're going to have, I want to say his name is Jim Wright. He's the author of the new Screech Owl Companion book. If you have a Screech Owl box or you're interested in having one, like everybody should own that book because it is a reference manual. So everything about screech owls, their behavior, the biology, what you'll see if you have them nest, how to get them nesting, how to do squirrel-proof boxes, how to try and keep them out, how to do cameras in your boxes, what to do if you get wasps in your box, how to live stream, all kinds of stuff. So they're going to be speaking, both of the authors, on January 28th. And we may have one more in February. I haven't got that finalized yet. So that's those programs, but let me share screen and show you some sneak peeks of the Owl Center plans. And I am going to, we're not going to go through the whole thing here. We'll start with so anyway, this is our current center that we're in. We also have, we call this the Owl House. We use this for online programs and cold weather housing for birds and storage. And this is where most of our birds live most of the time. And anyway, we're scattered all over the place. Admissions are increasing. We only have street parking, and we're going to have a parking lot. Right now we have 1 program space. The new facility will have 2, so we can have a school group and a public at the same time. Right now we have to be closed midweek so that we can do school programs, nursing home programs, things like that, because we only have 1 program space that isn't big enough. So we'll be able to be open 7 days a week, unlike right now. We have 1 toilet in our current building. Woefully inadequate for winter. It's fine. But yeah, we're super excited that we will have adequate toilets in the new facilities. I mean, like how basic. The staff is like, yes, we'll be able to go to the bathroom when we need to go to the bathroom. I mean, that's how much of an issue where we are now. We have 1 huge acoustic space because it's an old department store. So if you're sitting in a program and the phone rings, guess what? You get to hear the phone ring, and then I'm trying to talk quiet on the phone because there's a program going on. The only door in the whole building is on the bathrooms. There's no separate acoustic spaces. And obviously in the new building, we'll have separate acoustic spaces. Online programs are at the Owl House, so we're hauling birds back and forth, and we'll have a dedicated online program room and IT closet in the new building. Our birds work too much as it is right now. So in the new one, we'll have display only birds, and our program birds will be off display except for when they're out doing programs. Our birds currently commute to work. They'll live on site other than our retired ones at the Future Center. So the new location, here's the Nature Center where Candace and I met. And this is the River Bike Trail. This is the levee around Houston. We're gonna have walk-through aviaries down there and the main building site up here. So this is our architects and builders. So here's kind of how it lays out. The main building will be here, a parking lot, and then these are gonna be really awesome walk-through aviaries that I'll show you pictures of in a bit. This is how the building lays out. You'll come in through the gift shop. The program rooms are over here. Bathrooms there, and one for the people who come in and say, I just drove 3 hours and I really have to go to the bathroom right now. We'll have one right there. And even a staff bathroom, utter luxury. We'll have display birds over here. Prep room here. This is going to be kind of an evening room where motion trigger, and then the light will come on a mounted owl, and you'll hear the sound of that owl. So kind of like walking through the forest at night. These are the program birds. They'll be off display, but the offices literally look right into their aviaries to keep those birds really well socialized with the staff. But very easy then, if you're either in this program room or this program room, to go grab a bird, bring it in for a program and bring it back. Online program room is right there, again, right next to the birds, and the van will park right there. So for offsite program, again, right next to the birds. So the layout is going to be really, we spent a lot of time getting this layout exactly how we wanted it. So these are some renderings of what the building will look like. So these are those display only aviaries that you view from the inside. This shows solar panels on the top. We don't know if we'll do rooftop mounted or ground mounted, but we definitely want to do solar and geothermal in the new center so that we can be more energy efficient and environmentally friendly. Here's a view of the entrance. We don't want to have any mowed lawn. We want it to be all natural vegetation because for 2 reasons. I mean, well, a whole bunch. It's just so much better for the environment to have natural vegetation, and owls don't like lawn mowers. So there's kind of a raised up view. So this is kind of higher elevation, and then this is down in the park where those walk-through aviaries are going to be. And to give you a concept, these walk-through aviaries are based off of The original ones in the Bavarian National Forest in Germany. This is an eagle owl aviary. You have a path where you walk on the side. And the owls are literally free in there. There's nothing between the owls and you. They tend to hang out up on the rocks over here. You have a solid wall behind where the people are, or basically solid, so the owls won't want to try and fly through it. You have the roof slope up and away from the people, because the owls will want to be as far away and as high as they can be. So it's designed using the owl's instincts so that they won't want to come close to the people. So we'll have basically a circle or an oval enclosed walkway. That's so that the people going in and out are not bringing in mosquitoes and black flies that can transmit disease and kill the birds. Plus, people don't like to get bitten by black flies and mosquitoes either. It will also keep the rain off the visitors, the snow off the paths, and basically the owls will be in these aviaries around the outside. So basically you've got a large viewing window. The people stand over here, partial wall, so you don't run around where the owls are, and the owls are literally free in this vegetated area in these large aviaries. So here's what it would look like on the people side. We probably would need to have some mesh that can get pulled across here for when owls are getting used to things, or if, you know, if there's issues during breeding season or whatever. But the goal is that this would normally be open. So great for taking photos because there's nothing between you and the birds. And then kind of that side view that the birds would be here, people here, and you're viewing through that middle part there. And nobody has done this in the US. There's some zoos in Europe that have copied the concept, but nobody in the United States has. So this is Pierce, our newest ambassador. He's a young barred owl. He's not quite ready to go to work, but just about there. So we have to develop an interpretive plan. We're launching the silent phase of our capital campaign this month. So we're literally just starting. And then once we get far enough along, we'll have to do the actual construction plans for building it, and then build it. Ta-da! So it's going to be way better for the owls, the visitors, and staff. So things you can do, you can make a donation, make a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA if you're at least 70 and a half. Give a gift of stock or mutual funds. You can leave a bequest in your will or trust. You can name the Owl Center as a beneficiary of your IRA, 401k, or insurance policy, or talk with your financial advisor about other ways that you can give. And thank you, everybody, for being interested in owls and the Owl Center. Any questions about the new center or our plans or anything else?
When will it be finished, did you say, you think?
Depends on fundraising.
Right.
So we have to raise about $17 million. So depends on how fast that comes in. And then once we start building, they said it'll take about a year to build it.
It's been so great to see the project gain momentum. And it's because of your energy and the support from the Houston community. Truly, that town has just mobilized behind your efforts. And it's just really always been inspiring. So I've always taken pleasure in supporting your efforts. So count me in.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So each species will have its own observation bay, correct?
Yep.
Yes. And yeah, just how novel that you're able to use those European kind of designs to bring that to the United States. And yeah, you just do great work, Carla. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time tonight and the information and the research that you do. You truly are a mover and a shaker, and owl conservation is all the better because of you and your team's efforts. So thank you.
It is a team effort for sure. Yes, thanks.
Candace Lauren Beth Paddle from Bellevue, Nebraska. Just wanted to thank Carla for her excellent program and all the work she's doing. Also a question about the Sunday programs you mentioned. At what times are those being presented?
1 o'clock Central Time.
Okay.
So we pick 1 o'clock so that the Europeans can catch it late in the evening, and you can go all the way to Alaska and they can still catch it in the morning. So that's why we pick that time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions or comments for the group? This has been fantastic, Carla. Just really, really interesting and exciting. It's good to have speakers that are so passionate about what they do and excited. It gets us excited too.
Yay, good. It's good to infect people.
Yeah, looking forward to getting up there sometime to see all this. So
Yeah, so the festival, just expect it's like total zoo and chaos, and I'll be able to say hi, and that's about it during the festival,
Yeah.
because running around doing everything. If you come, you know, on a Monday in January, I'll have lots of time to talk to you.
I've got the date.
Okay,
well, this is recorded, so it'll be archived on our website for those that weren't able to come tonight to watch, and we'll post
Can I-
that. So
Can I ask you a question?
we'll let you do that, David.
Is there any idea what the population of barn owls is in in Minnesota, or even in the Midwest?
I don't think anybody has. Most owls, to know populations, it's so difficult to try and get a handle. Spotted owls, they probably have a very good idea. And like in the Netherlands, where there's a zillion people studying owls, they probably have really solid numbers. But otherwise, these other numbers are just guesses based on guesses based on guesses. So I don't think anybody has a clue how many. I mean, we know they're increasing, but beyond that, I don't think there's any guesses at all.
So we know they're there. That's the important part.
Yep, that's the main thing. And that was the big surprise, that they're in so many places.
I have a question for Carla.
Go for it.
What do you think limits the detections of owls from places outside of the roughly the driftless in Minnesota? The bulk of your detections are sort of southeast Minnesota, but southwestern Minnesota geographically is a lot closer to a lot more barn owls than La Crosse is. Is it landscape configuration, or have you thought about trying to do some monitoring in other parts of the state? It's a lot more difficult because the distances involved are greater, but do you have a hypothesis on that?
Well, I think they probably are in southwestern Minnesota, probably. But the key thing is they need to have open grasslands for hunting. So that's a key limiter for them. So where I found them is typically places where there's pasture,
Right.
Or prairie, especially short grass prairie, because taller grass prairie is a little harder for them to deal with. And if you get into, like in the driftless, we have bluffs. It can't all be plowed up and farmed. But when you
Right.
get into places where it's flat as a pancake and absolutely everything is plowed and all the fence rows are taken out, there's probably not barn owls there.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about the configuration of the land and the driftless is that there's a lot of places that are inaccessible for cow and plow, and there's a lot more grass-based ag compared to places that historically were much more grassland than the driftless ever was.
Right. Yeah. So we're kind of fortunate being in the driftless that we have so many rare species hanging on here, because it couldn't all be
Right.
plowed. You know, and we've got the diversity of habitats too. Even just north facing, south facing bluffs are, you know, different ecosystems to some degree. And we do have some pastures, you know, a ton of the pastures around here have still been plowed up. We're just fortunate in the little valley that I happen to live in. There's a couple of old farmers that had, you know, just a few cows for a while. Now they've both passed away. Well, one passed away, one's in the nursing home. They don't have cattle, but the pastures still exist for the time being. And we used to have, like within a mile, like 7 great big old barns, and all the old barns are coming down too, right? And we've lost 3 of them in the last few years. We had a tornado that came through and somebody took one down and built a house there. So yeah, so habitat is a key thing. Some people have been asking about climate, and is that the reason that they're expanding? And I don't think it is, because this afternoon I started going through looking at some of the like average annual temperatures in Minnesota, like average high temperatures by year and by decade. And it didn't really jive at all with the Minnesota Ornithologists Union reports of barn owls. So it didn't seem to fit. So I wonder if it's more habitat or I don't know. Who
It's
knows?
very,
Yep.
it's very
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, anything else from anybody? Any questions or comments or?
I'll just make a comment.
Yeah,
I've seen a number of barn owls but they're all been in the first tier of counties in southern Iowa.
What?
I don't think I've ever seen one beyond that first tier of counties in southern Iowa. That's a long ways from Houston County.
Yeah.
But they are seen around Iowa, but and the DNR actually tried to establish them in Iowa a number of times. And that hasn't really been too successful.
Right, yeah, so Iowa did captive breed and release. Wisconsin also did that, and they both kind of determined it didn't really make a difference in the population. I mean, partly because there's such high mortality anyway, and you know, they're dispersing and they didn't have transmitters on them, so they didn't know where they were going anyway. And then Bruce had said that what he felt was more successful was the barn owl boxes. And putting them in silos and really doing a lot of outreach with farmers, because sometimes they were showing up nesting in grain bins that had grain in them. Like somebody had left one of the, you know, those little oval doors left open, and then they were breeding in there. So all kinds of weird, bizarre places, but they tend to like to be away from people, but also where it's warmer. So the farther south you go, the more common they are.
Right.
But they have been expanding up into northern Iowa also. So the fun thing is at the Owl Center, we always ask people, you know, if you've seen a barn owl in Northeast Iowa or Wisconsin or Minnesota, let us know, even historically, because some of this historical stuff, like Minnesota says, oh, they were never really here. But from talking to, you know, doing programs in nursing homes and having older visitors come, no, everybody's like, well, you know, we used to have them in the mid 60s or the 50s or things like that. But it seems like very, very low numbers, and nobody really saw them breeding. They would see them like one day in their barn or a couple of days or just a single bird. But I don't have any reports. But we're interested in that old data also because, you know, back then, not that many people were birding. They didn't know it was uncommon and it just wasn't reported. So we're trying to capture those old records also.
Maybe you heard there was a barn owl at Black Hawk Point. Tom knows that place this summer.
Yes, I saw that picture on Facebook. That was, I mean, you really had to look to even see it in that photo. That was amazing. But yes,
it's not a grassland, it's a goat prairies, you know, really there. Yeah.
But it's also right by the Mississippi
It
bottoms.
is,
I'm
yep.
thinking the Mississippi bottoms are working for them. I kind of feel like, because they bred at Wabasha. Wabasha, they bred the bridge that spans the Mississippi River. They bred in at one of the beams underneath the bridge.
Okay.
And the only reason they found them was they were refurbishing and repainting the bridge, and the people working on the bridge went over and went, whoa, what are these things? So there, I got them recorded in Fountain City, so that's just on the Wisconsin side of Winona. Then we know they nest in La Crosse. I've had a couple reports of Ferryville, Wisconsin, so it's kind of like this Mississippi corridor seems to work for them, and I assume it's because there's islands that have grass and, you know, rich with little critters or something.
Yeah. More habitat there than a lot of other places.
Yep. Yeah. But I think a key takeaway from that, though, was that nest in La Crosse. It was in the city, but the people who had it, it was really cool. The guy that had that old dead tree, he told me that his previous neighbors had tried to force him to cut that tree down. They said, it's dangerous. You cannot have this. You have to take it down. And he fought to keep it. He said, no, this is a habitat tree. I'm keeping this tree. And he went to City Hall, and finally he had to cut the branch that hung over their yard, but he kept the rest. And what a better reward could you have for preserving a habitat tree, this old half-dead tree, than getting barn owls to nest in it? You know, and then coupled with that, he was also letting his lawn stay longer than most people do. And the neighbors had this heavily landscaped yard that didn't have much grass that was mowed in it. So I think kind of takeaways there are, you know, even if you don't have acres in the wood, or, you know, a farm or something like that, even on your own small property, you can make a difference by letting your lawn grow longer, or landscaping with natives, leaving dead trees standing when it's safe to do so. And then, of course, don't use rodenticides, because that's bad for all kinds of things. Keeping cats indoors is important also, because, you know, if you're a screech or a saw-whet owl, they do catch and get caught and killed by cats. So on our website, we do have kind of a list of things you can do to live an owl-friendly life. Take down soccer nets and other nets when they're not being used, because, you know, Google owl and soccer net, you'll find a million pictures. Take down unused barbed wire that's never going to be used again. That's horrible when owls fly into that. I personally have taken at least 3 great horned owls out of barbed wire. Ugh, horrible. And if you Google it, you'll find a zillion pictures of owls hung up in barbed wire. I've rolled barbed wire. I know how unfun it is to roll barbed wire, but now these days they have attachments for tractors and 4-wheelers that'll roll it for you. So there's actually real meaningful ways that you can do it and maintain your sanity and not be shredded by all the old rusty barbed wire.
A lot of things to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. It's good to see you all again, and hope to see you February at our next meeting, which will also be live Zoom. Finally got that figured out.
Yay.
To Zoom in live. If you're out of state or somewhere else, you can go, and that should be archived as well. And then the silent auction and other stuff. Be good to see everybody again. Happy New Year.
All right.
Those shovels going.
Thanks again.